This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863.
Hi, I'm Bruce McLean, Director of the MBA program at Valparaiso University. This episode of Money Sense features a topic I'm very passionate about: small business. Our country was founded on the principle of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our liberties are guaranteed by our ability to remain a free people. To ensure that freedom, we need to be financially strong. And not just some of us, but all of us. One of the reasons America has been so successful has been its entrepreneurial spirit. There are approximately 30 million businesses in the United States, and 90% of those businesses are small businesses, meaning they have less than 500 employees. Small business employs the majority of workers in this country and is responsible for most of the innovation. The entrepreneurial spirit in America is greater than anywhere in the world, and our future as a nation depends upon our ability to continue to develop successful small businesses. Unfortunately, 75% of new business startups fail. What can be done to improve the odds of success of these new businesses? Universities like Valparaiso University are opening centers for entrepreneurial success, where the university provides expertise, internships, technology, and funding sources. The center also helps develop success strategies for the entrepreneur, as well as exit strategies for the investors. The state of Indiana has created the Indiana Economic Development Corporation that provides tax incentives and matching funds for new businesses in Indiana. And the private sector is expanding its private equity companies, angel and venture capital, and a new and rapidly growing crowdfunding market. This year alone, $5 billion will be raised using crowdfunding websites. The conditions are ripe for a bumper crop of new and innovative companies, and Indiana is positioned to lead our nation in the development of these new entrepreneurial ventures.
Welcome to this episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci. This week we'll be discussing small businesses with Lorri Feldt and Barry Krause. Lorri is the Regional Director of Northwest Indiana Small Business Development Center. She provides business counseling to small business owners and startup entrepreneurs. Barry Krause is the founder and CEO of Suite Partners, the originators of the Live Lab Network, which is a blend of experiential marketing, brand content, public relations, production, and social media. Lorri, Barry, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Well, I'm really excited about this topic. We cover a variety of topics on Money Sense, some obvious ones, like budgeting and financial planning, and some not so obvious, like this one. Talking about small businesses and how, again, does that small business maybe leverage marketing and build a brand to help grow their business over time. And for those who know me, they know that I'm very passionate about small businesses. So this is an exciting one. That being said, I think there's maybe some misconceptions about what is a small business. So I thought maybe, Lorri, you can kick it off for us, maybe kind of just define for our viewers, what is a small business?
A lot of times people think of small businesses as the mom and pop type organization, right. But actually the Small Business Administration, who we work with closely, defines it as anyone with 500 employees or less. So obviously that encompasses in our region almost 98% of businesses in our area. So there are a lot of businesses out there who are considered small, who employ a lot of people in our region.
Wow, 98% you said?
Everybody but the mills, the hospitals, and a couple other employers typically.
That's a staggering number. I think that is a huge misconception. I mean, I know for myself, and I'm sure for our viewers. So how much then, if 98% of our community at least is made up of small business owners, nationally, how much of the economy does the small business kind of tranche make up?
It has an enormous impact on the economy, we definitely see that small businesses are producing more new jobs, at least the past several years into a decade, than those large corporations that we're also grateful to have in the region. So it has a huge impact.
What is a typical, I like to kind of break it down like the demographic or the kind of the psychographic, that profile of that small business owner? I mean, is there tend to be like a typical profile that you see with business owners?
The demographics are all over the map.
Okay.
Young, old, every race, male, female. And that's one of the things I love about working with small businesses, because each is an individual story. Mm-hmm. In terms of psychographics, their makeup as people, I think they do have some things in common. And certainly one of those has to be that they're willing to take the risk to start a business and to run a business. There is no guarantee of a paycheck. And it's a very competitive marketplace out there. So starting a business isn't for everybody. But they certainly have that makeup, a combination of determination, often a very positive outlook. Even when the economy was very difficult, you'd see entrepreneurs who always seem to find the glass is half full, or maybe entirely full.
Right.
So attitudes, they tend to share like that, and they're a pleasure to work with.
That's interesting. And you mentioned, starting this small business, and I can only imagine how difficult that is. How hard is it in today's day and age? Maybe you can even start back historically, and has it gotten harder or easier? Fast forward to 2014. I mean, what are you seeing out there?
I certainly think, and actually if you look at number trends, startups are down, even though there's so much attention these days on entrepreneurship, and you have these terrific television programs like Shark Tank and so forth. But the trend is a little lighter than it used to be, and I would say it is more challenging to start a business in today's times. It's more challenging to obtain financing. We have so many choices as consumers and customers. So a small business person entering a marketplace really has to identify, what am I going to offer that is worth trying compared to the competition out there? And that's often the struggle for a lot of entrepreneurs, is really identifying a niche, something that is unique that they can offer of value in the marketplace so that there's room in the market and customers come to them.
Do we think that there's less maybe of these small business startups today because of some of this structure? You said maybe it's hard to come across financing, et cetera, or maybe are the newer generations not willing to take on as much risk, or is it a combination?
Well, I'll start by saying, the internet bubble was a time period when, my gosh, we had several clients, Kinko's, Office Max. They were just booming because everyone was starting what we call a SOHO, a small office, home office or something. Everyone was in business. People can get financing. People were selling their companies even if they hadn't made a penny yet, and they were able to reap rewards from it. And I believe that just what happened to the whole financial complex and mortgages and everything else, money has tightened up, and this kind of boom, throw the dice and gee, life will be beautiful, we've got a little bit more realistic. So it's, you got to do a little more thinking and a little more planning and a little more modulated risk-taking.
More calculated risk-taking, absolutely.
Calculated, yes.
Makes a lot of sense.
There does seem to be a lot of interest among young people. I speak in front of college classes pretty regularly, and they're really inspired by some of the stories they hear. But then, there's that dose of reality that this is not an easy process. Maybe they're carrying some college debt on them already. But they do see and think of entrepreneurship as an alternative to what is a pretty challenging job market too. So, they've got those conflicting factors to weigh.
There's another thing I've observed, and it's like anything else in life, it goes in waves. And there are periods when whatever's happening in the world is spurring ideation, and people have ideas for new businesses, and they pursue them with their passion and their heart. A lot of times when business and the economy gets tighter, people will pursue new business in a more logical way. And they don't necessarily have a great idea that's driving it. It's, I want to have a small business. And so then they try and figure out what should it have. And
what should be my own boss type of thing,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. So the motivation to be your own boss, and gee, I should turn this into a business, versus, wow, we make better chocolate chip cookies than anyone, or I've got a new app that'll make people's lives easier.
No, those are good points. Barry, question for you with regards to, because you talk about business, and then I call it like the two B's. You have the business, and then you have the brand. I think some people think just because they have a business that all of a sudden they have a brand. Can you maybe talk about, again, the nuances between the two?
Sure.
From your perspective?
Well, think of all the businesses that Lorri just mentioned. How many of those can you visualize? The difference between a business or a company and a brand is a brand has a pulse, it has a heartbeat, it has a personality, it has a rhythm. It's able to build relationships with people and attract people to it. And it's ultimately, because I can get to know it, it's something people can count on. and depend on and become more and more loyal to.
So why would you say, what is the most important things or reasons that a small business owner should really have a brand? I think sometimes what I've kind of heard is, I'm just a small business owner. I only have, they always say I only have this, a pizza shop or this bakery or whatever it ends up being. I'm just a doctor. Why is it important for them to really think about themselves in the context of not just having, being in this business, but having a business that's a brand and a brand that really resonates with people? That relevance and that reach we talk about a lot, I think.
Well, I'll repeat my notion of a brand is something you can count on. But I'll quote Leo Burnett, who one of the great advertising men of life, who said, in a parody world, my best friend wins. And for the most part, there's a lot of parody out there. And even McDonald's, in their boom boom years, when people say, is your hamburger really that great? And Ray Kroc would say, it's not what's in the hamburger, it's everything I wrap around it.
I like that.
So just like a friendship, we're not just friends with anyone, and the depth of our friendship varies on what are the things that that friend is giving back to me. So a brand humanizes an organization in a way that it can cause real relationships based not just on need, but on want, liking, and liking can turn into loving.
Well, what I'm really hearing here is it's emotional. It's emotion and it's emotional. Would that be an accurate statement?
It's true. It's true.
And it's a relationship, right? You use the phrase just a small business. And I do think a lot of small businesses maybe think of themselves in that way, a little bit, not a strong image of themselves. But if they begin to develop that relationship can occur, can be facilitated with their customer. The customer gets what they're about. And I think the business owner is inspired by development of that brand and maybe focus his or her message more strongly, and that cultivates the relationship better. So it's really, forming that with your customers in a vivid way.
And forming that brand identity, I think sometimes, from what I've kind of seen, I love your thoughts on this, is I think sometimes business owners, they don't realize there's a disconnect sometimes between what they're saying and what people are hearing. That there's not a consistency, and then you add, make it even worse. Sometimes they're not saying anything, and they're just making assumptions that people just understand that value proposition, that narrative, kind of who they are.
Two quick reactions. One is, I agree with two things you said. One is the notion of consistency, because something that shows up different every time you see it is hard to get to know and depend on, but by being a brand that has some standards and definitions and aspects of it, it does cause people to speak more like with one voice. So that consistency is something I can count on. The second thing, I want to go back to when you said, so it's more emotional. And I stopped for a minute and I said, And I thought about it, and I believe you're right, because I can go to two places that sell coffee. And one, I just feel better when I'm sitting there. So it really is wrapping some of that emotional meaning and significance around the tangible product.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that, even though it maybe drives our behavior. I think we forget sometimes that emotion, as opposed to sometimes rational thought, really does win. And so, it's like you tend to gravitate towards people that when you're around them and with them, you feel good. Mm-hmm. And I think to your point, you're talking about that business really becoming that brand and being almost that pulse. I think we forget that when people walk in the door, that proverbial door, it's how are we making them feel?
Right.
Right.
And also when you make a decision to be a brand, it causes conversations among the people within the company of what does our brand want to stand for? How do we want our brand to show up? And I worked with a company several years ago that was a small business consultancy. Frankly, they were the first to admit that what they were offering was pretty parody, and there are others that offered the same thing. But I watched as they started building some of the branding elements around it. Simple things like, I'll never forget this, we will answer our phone on the first ring. I remember being in the discussion, and one of the people, the employees of the company said, now how do we do that? And the owner of the company said, good question, here's how you do it. Answer the phone on the first ring. And it's just sometimes just simple things like that that differentiate a brand, and, you know, versus another company offering the same service.
I love your example of answering the phone on the first ring, because that is an experience that people appreciate, and that would be a way to to differentiate from the other guy. So those little cues speak a lot to us when we're choosing businesses.
So let's go there, because I think Barry just said cost. And so one thing I want to talk a little bit about, because a lot of our viewers that may be small business owners today or want to become a small business owner in the future, they may be saying, this all sounds great, you know, and if you have a budget, it's easy to maybe create a brand. So in a day where we fast forward to 2014, in a day and age where it's not just about the physical anymore, but now there's a whole nother world and a whole nother level of digital. You know, I've heard in the past people use, there's this, there's the digital world, there's the physical, and now it's like this phygital world that we're trying to navigate through. And so how does one do that small business owner do that on a budget, create that brand in a way that's consistent with their financial capabilities?
First, it requires understanding that the world of marketing and communications has dramatically changed in the digital age. It has, and you have to fess up to the fact that we've been through the last 60 years of one-way monologue communications. I'm not sure that my good friends at McDonald's ever ran an ad that told you there are 54 grams of fat in a Big Mac. We edit what we want to say and we share it on our terms. It's one way. And for all intents and purposes, if you picked 5 competitors in the same industry, each one of them would in their own ways be telling you that they're the best. With not just the digital age, but with the advent of social on top of it, it's allowed us to do what we have done as human beings throughout our lives to get our most valued advice, and that is referrals from friends and others whom we may trust or who have an independent perspective. So we believe it's no longer about interrupting what people are interested in, commercials and ads the old-fashioned way. It's about being what people are interested in. And how does that show up in the world? Don't just talk at your customers. Start a conversation with them. Engage them. Ask them a question. Don't look like an ad campaign. I've seen research done that's asked people, do you remember seeing a TV ad or a newspaper ad for XYZ company? And these companies would make decisions based on whether people say, yes, I remember. The best communications, people don't even remember where or how they heard about it, but they have somehow just built a positive sense of that organization. So in a phygital world, you said it before, brands need to be experiences. And how you show up needs to be as human as your best friendship. And that could be done with a Facebook page and a few tweets and things like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think we have this great benefit really today, even from a cost perspective and a needs perspective, of social media, right? You're talking about, kind of going from what maybe historically had been this unidirectional kind of message. We are X, and now we can utilize. I would guess, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Technology, that platform, that medium of, let's say, social media, a Facebook page, to really start to engage and have that conversation with our clients.
It almost levels the playing field a bit for small businesses. Facebook is free, Twitter is free. There's time spent, and you have to think about those conversations and how you're going to engage people on social media. But a lot of small business people do this instinctively and successfully because they're used to communicating with their customers directly and personally. And this is just on a platform where they're doing that, maybe more visually. But that type of communication can be quite familiar to them and effective to them. So it's such a great tool, and no longer do they have to compete with the big guys, McDonald's, and the big ad budget, right?
You know, that reminds me of, we did some work with Cars.com, where they brought in a bunch of their big customers or clients who are car dealers. And we were talking to them about how local car dealers need to behave differently today than they used to. And the conclusion we all came to was, you got to be in the conversations. It's not just a question of running all those ads you used to run. And take a look at the web and see what your current customers are saying after they've had a service experience. Or look for people who are in the market buying for a car, and what are they talking about? Show up in those conversations.
Yeah.
That doesn't cost anything.
And let that drive your behavior a little bit from a feedback standpoint. That, again, is free. I mean, for the most part, again. So one thing I want to talk about, because believe it or not, I think we're almost running out of time already, and this has been such a great conversation. But, you know, talking about, again, this new phygital world, some of these maybe marketing strategies, if you can maybe, Barry, and then Lorri, jump in, please, but maybe bullet out some of these various strategies, but then more importantly, I'd love you to share some examples maybe of maybe some clients you've had or some stories that you've seen over the years of how they've taken maybe some of these new strategies, implemented them, and been successful.
Okay, I'll start.
Yeah, please.
Number one, keep it real. You will get busted. In this world, there's nowhere to hide. 2, get closer to your customers. Don't wait for them to come to you. Go to them. Go to where those conversations, whether it's about eyeglasses or popcorn, find where the conversations are and participate in some way. What is valued more than anything is third-party street cred. You can get into those conversations rather than always showing up with your logo big and bright. Oh, so an example. One of my favorites is a guy that actually came through my lawyer, said he had a client that was about to start a national ad campaign for a business he was taking over because his wife had started it and she had passed away. And he's hiring an ad agency, they're doing a national ad campaign, and would you talk to this guy? So I met with him, and he had his plans, and the product's called Diana's Bananas. It's a wonderful product. This woman invented it, I think, Taste of Chicago originally one year. A frozen banana on a stick dipped in gourmet chocolate. And it's, you know, in the world of frozen novelties, it's healthier than ice cream. I spent many years working on Nestle ice creams, and we launched a whole bunch of things there. And I know that all the ice cream manufacturers are looking for what they call BFY, better for you. But it's still, you know, putting more air in it and yogurtizing. This was a banana. Right. What we recommended to him is to not run this national ad campaign and the jingle and the radio and all that. People said, just be logical for a minute. Look at your business and your customer. Go look at the frozen novelty case during the summer in a major food store. The traffic is already there. Draw a concentric circle around those points of sale and show up there. We ended up taking photographs of banana peels, die cutting them, putting them across the entire aisle, and putting a big, huge mat just on the floor, pointing to the one single little facing they had down on the bottom with an arrow made out of chocolate that said 100% banana, only with a taste to your skin. And a brand that out of 206 SKUs or offerings in that frozen case got to 66 once in their 15-year history. With this thing in store, they got to number 3 in 2 weeks. Wow,
that's incredible. Lorri, we have about a minute left, so I was hoping maybe for our viewers, can you maybe share, you know, for that person that wants to get into the industry, if you will, and start their small business, or maybe an existing small business owner, what are some things that they can do, some resources they can leverage as they grow and start their small business?
We certainly work with clients all the time on a no-cost basis to assist them with that kind of business planning process, validating their idea. So at the Small Business Development Center, we do have a lot of market and other resources to assist folks in getting started. But there are a lot of resources out there, and I would highly recommend getting in front of potential customers, talking with them, and getting feedback from them early in the process before you take that big step.
It goes back to the engagement. I mean, really engaging with clients, with prospects, and communities. Thank you both so much. I've really enjoyed this. I had a great time. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers did as well.
Thanks, Anthony.
It was great.
And thank you. I hope you learned as much as I have. We look forward to seeing you next time for a new episode of Money Sense. I'm your host, Anthony Contrucci. And remember, we always try to make finance fun.
This program is made possible by PSCA, the Plan Sponsor Council of America. For over 60 years, PSCA has served retirement plan sponsors through education, advocacy, and research. Information at psca.org or at 312-419-1863. This program was produced by Lakeshore Public Media and Centier Bank.